Okay, everything seems to
Lucy
be
says no
working.
audio.
Yeah, yeah. That was because we were muted because we were talking to each other about nonsensical things. So, welcome to that's the camera. Welcome to the Break Magazine Dakar Preview Show podcast. Dakar is most certainly back for another year by some miracle. I don't think any of us are quite
Mhm.
sure how this has happened, but they seem to be making it happen. And I think all three of us, especially, but I think for a lot of us, are probably pretty excited for Dakar to be back. In this podcast, we're going to discuss anything and everything to do with the Dakar on the bike side. We don't know anything about cars or trucks, other than that they're terrifying when they come past. That's not a pleasant experience. But beyond that, yeah, we don't know a lot. So today we're going to take a look at the route, the main competitors, the teams, and the changes to the rules, and most importantly, who we think will win. I think we'll also probably go over some of the people who are a little bit more off the radar and so on. And today I'm joined by two people. One, my best friend, Cy Hewitt, and 2020 Dakar competitor. And my dad, an 8-time finisher, a serial punisher of himself. So, first question. I've lost my script there. I'm not very good at this. So, starting off, I think as with Dakar every year, the route is one of the main things that determines the quality of what Dakar is. What makes it stand out from the crowd is how difficult it is, and the route is always at the heart of that. And 2020 was without a doubt a landmark year. It left South America. It moved to Saudi Arabia after what, like a decade in South America. 2009 was the first one, and just like when it moved the first time, that first year was controversial. It was controversial when they moved away from Africa as well, but for very different reasons. It definitely split opinions before they decided to do it. It painted ASO in a bad light. And from the outlook, it looked like the same thing happened within the organization. Key people left after a really long time, new organizers, and then the race didn't go particularly well for them, as we've discussed earlier in the year in another podcast we did. But I think that's kind of all water under the bridge, and you kind of have to take this year as a whole new thing and give people the benefit of the doubt and hope that they've learnt from those lessons. So I suppose to start with, Sai, you were the only one of us that was there. So what was the route
Mhm.
like as a racer? What were the good things? What were the bad things from your experience, from your point of view?
For me, I loved the route. I thought it was really, really good. It was definitely a tale of two halves. The first week was really varied, to be honest. There was dunes, there was canyons, there were rocky sections, there was fast, there was slow. It's kind of um, and then the second week was definitely, to be honest, the last day of the first week, the day into Riyadh for the rest day, and the second week, they were super fast, like big open plains, short dune section, big open plains again, really full gas. Which, I mean, for guys like me, I'm not really hammering on those kind of big open plains anyway, so it doesn't make too much difference. But definitely for like the faster guys, like the potential for danger and for harm was definitely elevated in the second week for sure. It was and unfortunately, that's where we had the two fatalities in those faster stages.
So in terms of I think one of the things that I personally really liked about South America, and I know you were the same, Dad, was that like it was a super fun place to ride. Like there were always times where the riding was a grind or it was just a really long way, but overwhelmingly, more often than not, the riding was amazing fun. Like it was so good. So did you have that same experience in Saudi, or was it a little bit more of a grind? Were there just long parts where you weren't enjoying it, or was it fun?
There were, I'd say it was, yeah, a mixed bag. There was definitely some sections that were really fun. Some like long, deep sand sections that were kind of like nicely whipped out, and you could just like you just cruise along and like you were actually enjoying the riding. Um, I'd say the scenery probably was kind of more the kind of special thing about it, really, rather than the quality of the riding. I've definitely had more fun riding smaller events. Um, but yeah, I'd say the scenery made up for the maybe not so fun quality of the riding.
Cool. So for 2021, I've actually got a little map here. Check out my preparedness for this situation.
And so that's kind of question for Si from me, really. Like I think one of the things that for me was always fantastic about Dakar compared to other races, and I think what made it the bit that you described, Lel, where it went, where we had such interesting and fun and enjoyable terrain, especially when it was in South America, was the kind of multiple country, crossing countries and the complexity that brought to it as well, of having to carry a passport and making it that was part of, for me, what made it a massive adventure. And that's one of the things. Like, Dakar is still Dakar, and it's still for sure the biggest and baddest rally there is. But does it lose something because it's just going around one country?
I'd say probably so. Yeah. And obviously I didn't do it when it was multiple countries, but yeah, it definitely felt like I did Mazuga Rally in Morocco last year, and it just felt like an extended version of that, really. And yeah, I think I'd prefer it if it was going through multiple countries, and it looks like they're moving that way in future editions. I think from next year they'll start to incorporate neighboring countries like Jordan and Oman and stuff like that. But yeah, if there was anything missing from it, well, a couple of things. One, the kind of spectator participation in the race, kind of like there was just no fans anywhere. And from watching Dakars in years gone by, that's something that I kind of dreamt of, riding through Buenos Aires with millions of people right there lining the streets, and we didn't have that for sure. And like you said, the multiple countries thing, that was
So
kind of missing, I guess.
The supposed what was it, like, huge number of spectators that turned out for the start weren't there? Because I'm pretty sure they said that on the TV. 1 million people came out for the start, but then the TV looked like it was like the Trump's inauguration, where there's actually only 10 people in the field, but it was the biggest one ever. So I think that actually segues pretty nicely into my second question. For 2021, the route is pretty different. It's still a lap of Saudi, basically, but they've cut out most of the deadly eastern province and empty quarter. They've said as well, officially, the race is going to be slower and this is the official quote from their changes for 2021 section on the website. It says, to reduce the reliance on raw power. I am very skeptical about these things. And the route travels anti-clockwise around the country this year. It takes in some new areas, and generally as an overall route, and I think this comes back to like your point about it not going country to country, the overall distance of Dakar this year is short, like really short. But the special stage distance is basically the same as it was in South America. It's just under 5,000 K. But then I'm pretty sure, I can't remember exactly, but I forgot to write it down. But the total distance is only like 8.5. And a big part of what makes Dakar really hard is that you have to ride a long way even when you're not racing. That's always been the case. You've had to do horrendous liaison stages, and that's kind of part of the adventure of it, right? Like, if the stages were always only 300 Ks, even if they're the racing stages, it doesn't differentiate from any other African rally other than it's just a bit longer. But if you start to make every stage 300, 400 Ks long, and then you've got to ride the same again, it's a very different experience, right? So how do you think, what do you think about that?
I'll take that one. Yeah. It's definitely, like, I can only back up what you said about the, people kind of discount the liaison sometimes as just, oh, it's a liaison, it's fine, you don't have to think about that kind of thing. But when you're doing when you're doing 400 Ks before the special in the dark in like 5 degrees Celsius and kind of temperatures like that, it's really plays a factor. If they reduce kind of some of the liaisons, it'll make it easier to an extent. But the point, I guess, is there's always, you have to have liaisons somewhere, and where they are in the day and the length is definitely the kind of definitely affects how much of effect they have on the race. So like a long liaison in the morning will have a different effect than a long liaison at the end of the stage.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's one of the things that definitely differentiates, or has always differentiated Dakar, is having that side to it, and on two fronts really. I saw a little thing Lyndon did the other day about Africa race versus Dakar, and they made the point on that with a just all special, from a riding point of view and from a fun point of view, that's what you go there for, is to ride those stages. And why do we need the long liaisons? But for me, on the other side, those long liaisons, they are part of what makes it tough, for sure. They're part that makes it really hard, but they're also a part that kind of makes some enjoyment, some added enjoyment, because it's the time when you're, okay, maybe not the ones when you're leaving at 2 a.m. and riding at 5 degrees, but sometimes those liaisons, like, you do get to ride through some beautiful parts of the country, and you have got time to stop and interact a little bit with local people and see a bit more of the countryside, and you're not just trying to kind of go flat out. You're still trying to cover ground because it's a long day, but you do get a bit more, bringing back that adventure side as well. You get, especially as a privateer, I think it adds a little bit to it, that but maybe that's part of the problem with Saudi, is that you don't have that when you're doing the liaisons. You don't have that interaction with the local community and so on so much. Maybe, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been to Saudi, but that's for me where, you don't want the liaisons because you don't want to be that tired, but equally, that, like, sometimes they're a really memorable part of the event and really enjoyable part of the event.
Yeah, the liaisons in Saudi, they were definitely I imagine they'd be different in Africa and South America. In Saudi, it was a lot of like dead straight roads and just nothing, no villages, no, you'd look forward to the next thing on the road book. They would say, like, in 200 kilometers, there's a turning on the right, but you're not taking it, but it's just there. And then,
I suppose in a lot of Saudi,
I can't wait for that. That's going to be awesome. And you count down the kilometers.
I suppose
and you pass it, and it's like,
yeah. But I to be honest, in South America, I don't know that was a. I mean, it was. There's obviously things to look at, but it's probably not a huge amount different. To be honest, a lot of the time it was like, ride down this motorway for 300 kilometers and then there'll be a turning and you'll go and park in a field and that's where it will start from. That was my experience anyway. There was a lot of, sometimes the roads are pretty, but a big, long, straight road is still, even if it's slightly prettier, there's a lot of that. It just is, I suppose. You've got to cover ground. So one of the other interesting things was that I noticed when I started to look into the route and kind of dig things apart a little bit were in the late years of South America, especially, there was a really big push from the organizers to make it safer and more interesting for the bikes by making the nav harder. And the bikes spent a lot of time on their own on a slightly different route. It started to come in 2014 and 15 and it built more and more and more until there was multiple days each year and multiple marathon stages. And this year it's gone back the other way. The route is the same for everyone. There's no bike only stages and there's one marathon stage for the whole race. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or it just doesn't really matter?
For me, it's a really negative thing. It was one of the things that was, a massive change when it went from Africa to South America. For me, that they began to sort of think about the bike route a lot more, because when I did those ones in Africa, sounds like now, the route was very much driven by the the car teams, and sometimes it was really just downright dangerous and boring for a bike rider. And as soon as we went to South America, and David Castera became the race director there at that time, and he came from bikes, and he straight away made the routes like much more interesting and therefore safer for bikes. And then they started to bring in these even different routes. We had that first year in South America, we had a couple of mountains that we had to go over that the cars went around the outside of, and that was mega. Like, there was mountains that like people couldn't get up. I remember Cyril telling me he took 3 goes to get up the first hill. Fortunately, he left a bit of a line for the rest of us. But
wow.
and that stuff was like, that was a fantastic change for me. So again, I didn't ride in Saudi, but going back the other way doesn't feel like a good thing to me. It feels like, but of course it must be incredibly difficult for the organisers to put together separate routes as well. It's time consuming and expensive to do that.
Yeah, and I imagine that the biggest part of the problem is in South America. You did the first one, the third one, the 5th one there. And over time, it seemed like the better they learned the land and where they were going, the better they were able to make that route. And the first couple of years, everyone in South America was complaining that the race was too easy because there was too much dirt road. It wasn't difficult. It was just dirt road. Nobody's like, the finish rate went through the roof. Like, it got easier, but I imagine that's because it's really hard to put a route that goes into open desert together a lot, or to go into technical terrain and tie it all together in a safe way and produce that route in a single year. I imagine that's difficult, and you need to know a lot about the ground you're in, and that's going to take time for them to build that, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was quite like that. Like, definitely 09 and 11 were hard, but 13 was absolutely. But, you get that with every race, whether it's the 6 days or Dakar or whatever. There's always easier and more difficult years. And it depends a little bit on your own personal story as to how difficult they are. But, yeah, it's true. Like, 2013 was for sure one of the easiest ones. I remember going into the last day, and loads of us had like fresh, clean jackets on because we had time to wash our jackets the night before and go to the podium, even as a back marker, and that had never ever happened before. So, but then they definitely learned from that, and they made it harder again the next couple of years. I think that's always going to happen. There's going to be a year when, for whatever reason, the weather works for them as well. That was a big thing always in both Africa and South America. It was, very volatile to changes in weather, sandstorms and all that. Like, that can happen at the bat of an eyelid, I'm sure, in Saudi as well. If there happens to be a sandstorm in January, it suddenly becomes one of the hardest Dakars in years.
So, from your perspective, Sire, obviously there's places where the route goes to again this year that it roughly went to last year, 2 kind of corners especially. Are there any bits where you're like, it's a good thing that it's going there, or I don't really get why they're going there again, it was a bit crap, that people could kind of expect?
I guess the last week they were up in that kind of Neom region in the northwest. They have like a stage into Neom, a loop stage around there, and then a stage back down south. But all in that area, it was just spectacular. That was the best scenery, best riding. And so that doesn't surprise me that they're spending so much time there again, because it was just amazing. I'm surprised that there's a stage from Wadi Al Dawasir to Riyadh. I think this is the 4th stage, which is that's the stage where Paolo passed away last year, but in reverse. So I'd be interested to see how they make that stage different, and how they change it. I think it's shorter, like the specials shorter. I think it's less than 400k, but the liaison's super long. I hope they change that to make it less fast for sure. Otherwise, there'll be evidence that they're not learning the lesson, kind of thing, from an organization standpoint.
Ah, you're really good at these segues, by the way. You're very good at them. That segues beautifully into our next question. And the next point for me is the rule book, because the rule book has always, right since the early years of Dakar, that rule book has played a really big role in determining what happens and the outcomes of the race. And teams are really good at arguing over it, and it's a very French rule book. But when you dive into it, it is really clear. I think they're very good at making it obvious what the rules are and showing you which the new ones are. And there are some really interesting new ones for 2021. There's kind of, to me, it seems like there's two overarching themes. One is safety, which I think they absolutely had to address after last year, because nobody wants to see that. You know, you want a hard race, but nobody wants people getting really badly hurt or passing away, and not in the numbers that it was happening. And the other one is making the race more like it was, more endurance focused, more about looking after your equipment. That was what Dakar was for a really long time, was about managing to make a bike survive for 2 weeks in the desert. And bikes have got so good that the rules have to change. And I think it's a good thing. However, some of them, there's also some question marks over. The one you just mentioned was about making the race a little bit safer, especially on those super fast stages. And there's a part of this where it feels a little bit like the organizers haven't taken much responsibility for it, but that's not, you know, that's a different question. That's a much deeper, more complicated question. But they have proposed that now there will be new slow zones within the stage with a lower speed limit. So you would think that if they're in an area where it's ballistic, wide open, 180 k's an hour and a bit sketchy, they're just going to put like 100 k an hour limit on it. A bit like when you ride through a village, but maybe not as high, which is interesting. I suppose it's a good thing. I don't know. What do you think about compulsory slow zones in the middle of a racing stage? Do you think they should be doing that, or do you think they should just be choosing and making the terrain better?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a bit, I guess, slopey shoulders on the part of the organization. For me, a lot of these rules are make it out that, you know, they're imparting these rules on the competitors, which says that it's the competitor's fault that it's dangerous, when that just stinks to me of them kind of washing their hands of kind of a bit of responsibility there. I'm sure I really hope they've changed some of their processes within the organization and the way they decide the route and stuff like that. If they're only putting these rules on the competitors and they're not changing anything on their end, that will be disappointing for sure. But yeah, the speed zone thing, it depends how they implement it, I guess. If they're doing it on, they must be doing it on the GPS, like just capping it.
They are.
Yeah, say 100. I mean, 100 k's an hour to them, to the top guys, that'll seem pretty slow for sure. But
I think someone in the comments has just said that it's 90. I didn't see that in the rule book, but that's what someone's just said. I'll have to double check that in a minute. But it also says in the rule book that they're doing it the same way that they do it when you go into a village or a speed restricted zone. You have a waypoint in and a waypoint out. Between those zones, you'll get a notification on your GPS. And that's also something that they've started to change, is for the speed zones and for dangerous sections. I think double and triple cautions, you're now going to get like a warning through the Sentinel system that that's coming, which I mean, part of Dakar has always been that you read the bloody road book because it's there, but we all get tired and make mistakes. And I don't like it. I mean, that's kind of one of those rules that there's no bad side to it. The only potential thing you could say is that maybe they shouldn't be interfering that much. But I think making it safer is making it safer, right? Like, it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's super difficult to, until they've run that bit this year and you see how it works. I think it's quite hard to be sure about that. And I've criticised ASO when they've made these kind of rule changes, or critiqued it several times before. But also we have seen over the years with ASO, it is them really leading the way in Rally Raid, and it is always them kind of making these changes and making stuff happen. And, like with all changes, sometimes you have to make a change and go, oh, actually, that didn't work how we thought it was going to work, and back away from it. And they're also very good at that. So there's a bit of me that kind of says it's good that they're doing stuff and trying stuff, which, it should be the FIM's job to do that. It should be the Federation's job, and the Federation doesn't. It's always ASO that leads. In Rally Raid, it's always ASO that kind of comes up with this stuff and tries stuff out. I mean, the speed limit thing for me is a difficult one, and I imagine it's a difficult one for them as well, because, again, it's a double-edged sword of, yes, you slow things down, you make them safer, but there's two other sides to that. One, the fast stuff is what looks awesome on the TV from the helicopter, and all of us sat here in a week's time are going to love watching Quintanilla go wide open off a sand dune in top gear and case out on the landing. Like, how many times have we all rewatched that clip? Everybody loves that stuff when they get away with it. And when you're riding as well, like, it's awesome going fast. It's part of what drags us all out to the desert to go wide open. Otherwise, you might as well stay in a forest in second gear in a deep rut, which doesn't look good on the TV.
No, it doesn't.
So they're kind of trying to balance those two things, aren't they? Of making it look good, making it fun and awesome to ride as well with safety. It's a fine line to find. I don't know how you do it,
Well, they've made some other interesting changes that kind of also go along those same lines. The first one, and I don't think anyone's going to argue with this, like, I'm sure riders are riders, and especially when you're into racing, people seem adverse to wearing any body armor at all, but airbags are now compulsory, the same way they are in MotoGP. And there's no way that can be a bad thing. Do you know? The interesting part of that airbag thing is that neck braces are now banned, because you have to wear an airbag and the two don't go together. So we're on an airbag only situation, but bloody hell, I don't have any argument with that. Like, if I've got a big old sack of air protecting me when I crash, that's only going to be a good thing, isn't it?
You have already, haven't you?
Oh, savage. So we're going to move swiftly on from that. Another new one is the fuel stop rest area. They've changed how that works as well. So it's now banned for you to work on your bike at fuel stops, the compulsory 15-minute fuel stop rest area. It's illegal to work on your bike in that time zone. Once you leave the time zone, obviously you're back to race conditions. You can do whatever you want. But in there, it's completely banned. They basically, in the rules, it says you're meant to drink, eat, and put fuel in your bike, and don't do anything else.
And that's exactly as it's always supposed to be, and that was the principle of the rule before. But some canny team managers managed to get their factory riders off the hook when they did work in the work areas. So then they all kind of let each other get away with it. But my understanding is that that was always the principle, that once you come into the fuel, you're not supposed to work on your bike. But so I think the fact they've actually made that official is exactly how it should be.
There we go. So
you break your bike, you lose time. That's the point.
There we go. Well, it seems like that is very much like a consistent theme through all the other rule changes this year. If you break your bike, you're losing time. That's your fault. You shouldn't have broken it. So the first one is elite riders. So anyone on the elite list, that's generally like roughly the top 40, are only allowed one model of tire for the whole race. Those tires are marked at the start along with their wheels, and that's it. That's all you're allowed. So if you ride a Michelin desert race, that's the tire you've got, which is interesting. I don't know that I understand the point of that. Like, maybe it's a cost-saving measure, but choosing the right tire for the right type of terrain should be. It's no different to MotoGP having a soft and medium compound, right? Like, if you choose a good tire for riding sand, it's going to help, unless there's something else going on there and they've found that incidents have been caused by people using inappropriate tires or whatever. But it seems a bit of an odd one.
Maybe Michelin's got a bigger budget.
Yeah, maybe Michelin's got a bigger budget than everyone else. But But the more interesting part of that is, and
it's only the rear tire though, isn't it? I think.
No. I think the tires chosen, the model of tire is both tires. Okay. I believe. I need to double check that, but I believe that's the case. The bit that's rear tires is the max of 6 only for the whole event, but that's still an elite only rule as well, according to the rules. On the website, it reads like one thing. In the rule book, it reads like another. But the rule book is saying that it's 6 tires for the whole race, which means 1 rear tire every 2 days. That's going to be a big thing for those guys at the front. That's going to make a really big difference to their capacity to push hard, I would think. Whether it's Sai, your dad actually made a little comment here. I've put this up on the screen, but he says surely the reduction of limiting the tires is sketchy. And that is a really interesting kind of point about this, is riding on a knackered old tire, going really quickly, is sketchy. Like, there's no doubt that is going to cause some massive crashes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting paradigm. I like the fact that they're trying to push people to have to think about looking after that stuff more, but that could be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think forcing riders into those kind of situations, it's I'm sure ASO had like the right intentions when they decided that, but like they must know that when kind of those top guys are like, I don't know, in stage 11 or 12 and they've got a shot at the podium and they're on a knackered Michelin desert race. I mean, they can have as many mooses as they want, but if that tire's knackered and they're pushing hard, that's sketchy for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing as well, and you've definitely had this, Dad, is that once the bead on one of those tires goes or it gets knackered and the tire starts to collapse, even if you've got a new moose,
it's gone.
It's gone. Like and they already had I don't know why, but they already had a big problem with that last year, right? Like a lot of people had moose failures, which hasn't happened in a few years. I don't know whether they like changed the people who were doing the mooses or there was a problem with them or what, but and it's a problem when your moose fails. Like, it is not a situation it's easy to get out of. So it was an interesting one. The other big one for some teams and not others, and this kind of starts to you could throw a few conspiracy theories in here. Time penalty for piston changes. I mean, it's not unknown knowledge. Especially Sai rode a Yamaha. You rode a Yamaha in Dakar last year. And they strongly recommend you change the piston all the time. Like what did you say? I think that the factory guys on the Yamahas are changing pistons every 2 days.
Yeah. Last year they were, yeah. And like a non-factory Yamaha rider was doing it in every 3 days. Yeah.
So obviously longevity. I think the longevity thing is good, but it seems harsh on one team if one team has a problem with that and then all the other factory teams don't, and they don't have to change one. Do you know? Like, it's not really a level playing field out the gate, but that's racing. This was an interesting one that I've never come across before, but it goes alongside that whole moose thing. It's €1,000 fine for leaving a tire in the desert.
Beautiful, isn't
Which
it?
I'm sure if you're a factory rider,
is it?
Pardon?
Is that bike saying that's
across everything? Everything.
Yeah.
So if you're a factory rider, maybe it's not such a problem because someone's paying you €1,000 for you. But if you're not a factory rider, that's a savage punishment.
That's brutal, isn't it?
Brutal on the water boy. I'm just thinking about those great shots of Andrew Short riding in on the rim last year. This year he'll be riding in on the rim with a tyre around his waist as well.
Yeah, he will.
So good.
He'll never look more adventure. And the last kind of big one is there's two to do with roadbooks. The first one is 20 minutes prior to the start. Now, what was that like, Sai, to ride with getting your roadbook as you went into the stage?
Awesome. I loved it.
Well, there we go. Job done. That's a good change then.
Yeah, last year we had I think it was 25 minutes last year. But still, in that time, like the top guys were going through the road book with like a highlighter. Like there was a table next to the start, and some guys were like going through it quickly and marking some stuff, which is mental. Yeah, putting the act of putting the road book into the holder, as you guys know, is like a pretty stressful thing. So like I used all the 25 minutes to like get it in perfectly, because what inevitably happens is later on in the stage, as the road book goes from like one pinion to the other, it starts to jam a bit if you don't get it in perfectly in the morning. So yeah, I definitely used all my 25 minutes to get it in just perfect. Yeah.
So did you have a problem with the fact that they're deciding how it looks for you? Did they make any changes to the way they print the road book? Like, were the cap headings bigger, or certain things changed, or were they kind of the same?
I think the cap headings were bigger and highlighted in yellow. And yeah, it was really good. Like the consistency between every day, it was like always exactly the same. And all the modifications and the new notes and stuff like that, they were all really good. Yeah, I didn't hear many complaints really.
You don't.
And yeah,
you don't spend time on the
everyone.
same Facebook pages as I do you? There was a lot of complaining on Facebook. My gosh. And so the other thing that goes along with the road books, and this is another interesting one, you know, the whole map man issue that kind of surfaced in the last couple of years in South America was with Honda theoretically cheating and having notes on Benavides' bike, and it caused a big uproar, and there was lots of kind of weird photos floating around Facebook and talk of people mapping stuff out. It's not, yeah. But one of the things that the organizers have done is it's really important in the rules. They say you're not allowed to mark the road book in any way. You're not allowed to put any additions on it. They're going to do all of that. And you have to return your road books to the organizers at the end of each week. So week 1, they have to be in by the rest day. Week 2, they have to be given over at the finish. What do you think?
I mean, stuff like that, I don't know. It makes no difference, like, to guys around me in the field, kind of thing. But I guess they just don't want to have the road books kind of floating around the teams, and teams being able to go back and rerun stages and stuff like that, I guess. But yeah, by the end of week 1, you know, the team can photocopy all the road books and like have that information. So I don't really see what that gains really from like the rules perspective. So yeah, it's a strange one.
Don't they putting it in there to say, to check that they're not cheated?
Yeah.
You know, because they did that last year, didn't they? They started
collecting the elite rider ones in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To check the notes and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, make sure they haven't written in, turn right and go down the beach flat out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny
For
Campbell.
Example.
Yeah. No Johnny Campbell rules.
Exactly.
So I suppose the next thing is to talk about the teams. The team, you know, Dakar is very, on the outside, seems like a very individual rider sport, but without a doubt, a bit like in cycling, the team seems to play a huge part in the success that riders can have, whether it's through the bike or the structure or whatever it is. There seems to be a lot more at play than just being a really good rider on a really good bike. And we've seen that massively in the last few years with Honda, because it took them so long to break that KTM stranglehold. But one of the interesting things for me about rally is that you don't have that thing that we typically have in like other forms of motorsport, where riders bounce around teams. It seems very much like that stuff is very static year to year. KTM have had the same 3 primary riders now for quite a long time, and they'll put one in to try them every year, but that stays the same. Honda's team is unchanged. The main one that has changed is the Yamaha team. The Yamaha team, De Sultre, the crazy French dude that keeps having massive crashes but is super good to watch on TV, is gone. And they replaced him with Andrew Short from the Husky team and Ross Branch from KTM South Africa. But I suppose my first question with that is, what does that bring to Yamaha? You know, the last few years, they kind of have been in a position where they were the up-and-coming team. They've brought in 2 new guys, but neither of those seem like they're going to be race winners. You know, you don't look like Ross Branch is a great rider. He might win a stage or 2, but I don't think anyone's looking at him as someone that's going to win. And as much as we all love Andrew Short, he's a late 30s former retired Supercross rider. He's very quick, but he's not there to win. So what's going on there?
Yeah, for me, I think they're just trying to get as many kind of consistent top 10 guys as they can in the team. As many kind of, as many kind of ducks in the duck race, so to speak. I think although maybe those guys aren't kind of really touted as race winners, if they are there or thereabouts by the rest day, which I think all of them can be, then they're like podium shot guys. And I think for Yamaha, maybe for the win, I think it's Van Beveren, and that's it really. But yeah, they just need to flood that top 10 with as many blue bikes as possible, in order to put themselves in the best position of having a blue bike on the podium.
Very insightful.
Nothing to add.
All right, I was waiting for some wisdom from Dakar Yoda.
No, I can't. The only reason I can imagine is that they've got a lot of faith in Van Beveren, and you know he needs some good guys to back him up, and they haven't really. You know, the other guys that we would all kind of put as potential overall winners are tied into contracts elsewhere. So there's probably not a lot of choice, you know.
So along the same kind of track, Honda played that underdog game from the moment they came in. They came in with more budget than anyone else, and it's taken them a long time to finally win. They won last year. Brabeck was incredible. The last 2 years, he's looked like an absolute force. You know, he's consistent. He's insanely quick. He seems to be really good at navigating. But KTM have obviously won 20 in a row. Do you think Honda are a team that have turned the corner that they clearly couldn't turn for a really long time? They made some big changes in the personnel in the last couple of years to bring in new people. They changed where the team is based. They changed who runs the team. Do you think they've turned that corner where year after year after year, they're now in a position where the whole team can be like KTM, where every rider there has a shot at being on the podium? Or do you think it's a situation where Brabeck carried the team because he's just something else?
I think Honda's sorted it out now. I think they've worked it out. I think it's going to make it even more interesting, because I think they've got probably 3 riders, and KTM's got 3 riders that are all capable of winning it now, and they understand the game now. I mean, they like you said, they've proved that the last 2 years. I think they've worked it out, which makes it awesome, makes it interesting, because we haven't really had that situation for forever, because KTM was the same before their, whatever it was, 18-year win streak. They tried for 10 or 12 years and kept getting beat, and took them a long time. And once they did work it out, they started winning, but everybody else left. You know, so then it was just the KTM show. But now we've actually definitely got 2 manufacturers that are going to fight for it, and 6 riders, I think, anyway.
So here is the kind of crux. Do you think that A, changes KTM's approach, and B, changes the approach of both of those teams to become more tactical? Or do you think they keep going the way they have the last 5 or 6 years, where it's been like, we're just going to throw everything at the wall and one of these dudes is going to go faster than everyone else and win? Because back in the day, it was like a very tactical game, right? Like the Mark Comer and Cyril Dupre era was always a cat and mouse game. There was two guys there who were quicker than everyone else, and they played this little game with their water boys where they were always trying to just gain a bit on each other. Whereas since then, since those guys retired, it's just been balls to the wall race between like 8 guys every year.
I think it's closer to those guys who are riding wide open. But I think if you listen to any of them, for them at that level, there are still definitely tactics and definitely thinking which days to win and which parts of which stages to attack on. But as Mr. Scorber's rule pointed out, that's exactly what I said last year, was that Ruben Ferrer coming from into Honda is definitely a big difference in the Honda team as team manager.
And I think Brabeck's kind of brought in like guys like Jimmy Lewis and Kendall Norman and Johnny Campbell in the States as well, which is like, and they're training with Cornejo Nacho, one of the Honda riders, and they've had Benavidez up in Nevada training with them as well. So I think I think that element is a game changer for them as well.
So I don't know if you saw this, but Andrew Short's been training with them as well. Obviously they don't share any bike stuff because that would be bad. But yeah,
we've seen that a lot in in the last years in motocross as well, where suddenly all the fast guys train. It didn't used to be a thing. Everyone used to hide in their own corner and train in their own way and do their own thing, and then just turn up at the start line of Dakar. I mean, Cyril and Como were classics for it. They had totally, even in the same team, totally different programs, hid in their own little worlds. But now, like has happened in motocross, these guys are all going and riding with each other week in, week out and training together, even though they're competitors. And that's when you see the footage of the way they're riding rally bikes now. It's off the charts. The level has gone, for sure, the level has gone up another level.
Did you see that footage of Andrew Short riding at the Kurt Caselli ride day?
No.
On the motocross track. I'll post a link in... I'll post a link in the description after this because it's too hard to get Instagram to play on this feed. But it's amazing, like incredible. There's one step-up jump that's like 80 to 100 foot, and he just like floats over it as though he's on a dirt bike. It's unbelievable. He looks so comfortable on it. So, other interesting team news: Gas now a KTM. That's not a secret that KTM own Gas and that they are riding a KTM or a Gas rally bike with liaisons. I would imagine that this is probably her last year before she becomes a car driver. I would imagine anyway. It seems like that. It seems like the way it's gone, which is why they've put her on a Gas. It's like a nice little swan song scenario. But really, the kind of other question about the team news, once you talk about the 3 big Japanese manufacturers, are Husky, which is again an interesting situation because they don't really put anywhere near as much into it as KTM, which I find quite interesting, but they have one big name rider in Quintanilla and one small time rider in Benavidez Luciano. How do they play into the equation of KTM as well? Because Quintanilla has done pretty well the last few years.
He's absolutely a contender, and for me, so is young Benavidez. I think he's coming.
Okay, and Sai,
I'd say so.
You've paid a little bit more attention to the kind of other parts of Dakar. There's a few other teams out there: Sherco, Hero. There's a Chinese team as well? Did I see? There's another rally bike. I missed it anyway. But what about the Reju team from Espagne?
Yeah, yes.
And is that their own bike?
No, it's KTM with Reju stickers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about Sherco and Hero?
Sherco, I'd expect a Sherco in the top 10. I think Santolino is going to fly. I think he was injured last year, so he didn't go. But I think he was podium at Andalusia Rally. I think he's going to be really quick. In terms of the Hero have got Rodrigue, Santos, and I think that's it, because Bueller broke his collarbone a few weeks ago. So Hero let go of Oriol Mena, which is crazy to me. I can only think it was a budget thing, because he's been top 10 the 2 times he's finished. So he's gone to that reissue thing with Pedrero. I think they'll obviously go well on that. So yeah, I think of those smaller teams, I'd look out for Santolino and Mena.
Okay, interesting. So before we talk about who we think is actually going to win and who's going to do really well, I think I want to go through the privateers, the people that you are just a fan of, and racers that have got the capacity in them to do something a little bit exciting, to do what Ross Branch did last year, where out of nowhere he won a stage and then the next day had a fantastic crash. That kind of stuff. It makes great stories. So who are we looking at that's got the potential to do that this year?
I'd say top of the pile, probably Skylar Howes. He was on the HT team last year, I think.
Does he count as a surprise after finishing 9th, though?
Yeah, I guess not. But he's well. The surprise was he didn't make it onto his factory team, which is mental to me.
It's yeah. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if I'm Husky, I'm putting on a 3rd Rockstar bike for him. Because he's that good. So yeah, I think, yeah, you've got guys like Niter and Chapelier, but I can't see them breaking the top 30, to be honest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Camille Chapelier is a incredibly fast beach racer from France. I don't know if he's ever done any other racing, but he's unbelievable in the sand. Like nearly as good as Van Beveren, kind of good in the sand. And David Knight is a former many-time world enduro champion. He's not so young anymore. That's maybe his little bit of a hang-up. You mentioned already,
and he's a rookie.
And he's a rookie.
He's also.
And he's a rookie. But there's a great story there, because the dude is a bit of a legend in dirt bike world. For me, anyway, and I'm sure Dad would probably say the same as this, I think there's 2 others that are both on factory teams. The first one is Daniel Sanders, because if you're not really into enduro, you might not have heard of him, but Daniel Sanders, the last few years in Australian National Enduros and at the 6 days, has been like otherworldly in how fast he can ride a motorbike. The man has never seen a sand dune in his life. I don't know if anybody's watched the series on Red Bull's YouTube channel that they've started to do. He quite openly admits he's never ridden over a sand dune before. They did their photo shoot in the Middle East. But he's, for me, got potential to immediately be a top 5 guy.
Yeah. He's on Toby's level, isn't he? He's like that kind of next young guy coming up, and you watch any footage of him riding, he's off the charts. And he won the 6 days last year in Portugal with 2 days where it poured rain and was slippery as hell, riding a 500 4-stroke. Like, that's not normal. He's he's something special. He's and he's fit. He's yeah.
Well, you're suggesting that Toby's not fit?
He suggests that all by himself.
He's
still fitter than any of us, but he's not a Matthias Wagner, is he?
No, but it's worth going to check out those videos from the KTM team on Red Bull. They're really good, and there's a little bit in it where Toby basically says, "I sit down a lot because I'm not fit enough to stand up all day." He doesn't quite word it like that, but the sentiment is definitely there. So and so the last one that's kind of, there's actually 2 that I've got written down here. The first one is Jamie McCanny.
Yep.
Nearly a world enduro champion multiple times over, fantastic rider from the Isle of Man. Does he have it? Can he make that?
I'm gonna go. There's two in the same bottle as him. There's Jamie McCanny and Jaime Betru. I think they were 12th and 13th as rookies last year. Maybe they were kind of locked together all the time, and they're both unbelievably talented, and they both rode like a rookie should ride last year. Like, they never rode to the speed we know they've got. They rode to get to the end and learn. And then this year they're going to be a little bit off the leash, and we'll see if they make that next step. But I think they can. I think they're,
So the last one I wrote down, go on, Si. Yep.
I was going to say, can you still hear me? I've just got one AirPod in.
Yeah, we can hear you good, man.
Yeah. Just about Jamie again. So last year, obviously, kind of kept a low profile kind of thing in the first half and three quarters of the race. But in stage 10, him and Fagata stopped to help a injured rider. And then they both came like flying through the field and got like 6th and 7th on the stage or something like that. So the next day, Jamie started 6th. And he got a chance then to ride with those top guys, and he rode most of that 11th stage with Quintanilla, and he got like 6th on the stage or something like that. So I think that experience is going to really help him this year, and I think Jamie's a top 10 guy for sure.
Well, Roger, hope that answers your question. So a couple of other things. There's one more person I found in my notes that was really interesting. It was someone I hadn't heard of. He's quite high up the elite list. His name is Adam Tomicek. He's from Poland. He's on the back a few years ago. There was a bunch of Polish riders, insanely good riders, and they were sponsored by the Orlen, the Polish company that seemed to hand money out to Polish athletes like Candy. But he also had a really good result at Andalusia rally this year. Kind of a bit of a standout because I've never heard of him. I don't, maybe he's from World Enduros and I've just missed him over the years, but he's not someone that has been on radar as an outrageously good rider, but his results so far are pretty good, and they kind of reflect in the number that he's been given for the race as well. One to watch.
And Dabrowski's, you talk about those Polish riders, Marek Dabrowski from a few years ago, who's now in cars, is one of the guys you were talking about. I think it's his son's riding this year. He's the youngest rider.
Is he? That's
maybe
one to watch.
Yeah.
Those dudes know how to ride for sure. So cool stories, people that you might not know of, but they've got something, just a good little story going on. The one I picked out because he's the one I knew, is a guy called Franco Pico. 3 podiums in the 80s. It's his 15th Dakar, spread over 4 decades, which I think is pretty damn cool. There's currently no one else. The other fun fact, he's currently of all the current competitors riding, he's second on the total podiums list. So there we go. Good job, Franco.
Wow.
More podiums than anyone
awesome.
Apart from Toby.
And also a very cool dude.
Very cool dude. So is there anyone else in that list that's worth kind of just keeping an eye on because they've got something rad going on?
I got a humorous one. There's a guy called Wiley Joe Bard. I don't know if you come across him.
I haven't. That's a great name.
He's done, I don't know how many. He's done loads of Dakars. He right back to when I first started as well, like late 90s. He was there. He's got a lot of DNFs, to be fair. But he's got a good few finishes in there as well. And he's always doing something a bit wacky. So this year he's leading the future charge, riding some sort of hydrogen hybrid bike.
So that's another new thing that's been introduced this year, hey, is like they're starting to push that stuff on both the car and the bike side quite a lot. But that's interesting. How are they getting the hydrogen into his bike? Have they just got a hydrogen tanker driving around?
Yeah, it's some sort of hybrid. I don't know how it works, but he just needs 4 liters of water to mix into however it works.
No,
so he's got a little
doesn't.
tank on top of the clutch.
That is well impressive. Unless it's just like a normal dirt bike with a little water tank on it to pretend.
Maybe.
That's impressive. Fair enough. So then the kind of last bit to talk about is who's going to win. I think in the last few years, there's no doubt that it's been super open. I would say until maybe the last 2 years. And now we've got 4 people in the lineup who have won. Also Toby has won multiple times. Clearly one of the favorites. But there's some big decisions there because on every team, as you said before, on the Honda and the KTM team, there's 3 riders who are quick enough to win, whether they will or not. This has been a bit of a sticking point for you in the past, Si. Be interesting to see whether you maintain form on this. So with kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 riders in the mix who have got the speed to win this race, who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is realistically going to be on the podium? And Si, when are you going to give up thinking Bareda's going to win because he's past it?
Not this year. I'm going for Beretta again.
No, you're not. No, I'm not having it. I'm going to cut you off the call if you do that.
I think even Beretta thinks he's a water boy now, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He said he's going for a podium in his official little blurb. Because in his this is his 11th Dakar, Beretta.
Wow.
And he's an amazing rider. He's like right up there on the all-time stage wins list. But he's never finished on the podium.
And it's mental, isn't it?
It is mental, but clearly you're not allowed to pick him. So pick someone else.
I think the podium this year, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just the same. Brabeck, Quintilano, Price, maybe the order changes, but I think it'll be those guys.
So you don't
cop out.
No, not at all. But they've shown it the last few years. Those 3 have been the consistent 3 that have been like pushing for that. What about Van Beveren? Do you think the limit is his bike? Do you think the limit is the fact that he's now had 2 horrific crashes 2 years in a row? Does that mess with his head too much? Or do you think he can be there?
I think he needs a good year this year, or he's out. The past 3 years he's had like you said, those big crashes and a couple of like heartbreaking DNFs, mechanicals. So, by his own admission, he had a real low point after his crash this year, but he's had a really good year of training, and he did really well at Andalusia. So I'm a big fan of his. I really hope he does just get a solid finish. I think he's definitely good enough for the podium. Whether the bike is, we'll see. I hope he does all right for sure.
And what about you?
Well, I think it's like always with Dakar, it's the hardest thing in the world to predict because so many things can happen and go wrong. But for me, the 2 strongest are definitely Brabeck and Toby. And I'm gonna go full partisan and go Toby's gonna win it again. The only reason those 2 are definitely, I think, got a little bit more than anyone else. And obviously last year, Toby had the moose blow, and that was kind of the 20 minutes between them at the end, I think. I think on a day-to-day basis, those 2 can just swing off it a little bit more than the others when they need to. And, so I put my hat on Toby. There you go.
Who else on the podium?
I don't care. Doesn't matter.
That's not how this works.
It is. Who remembers? Who remembers who came where? And only because you looked it up 5 minutes ago. That's what happens every year. You remember who wins, and after that, anyone else that's got a finisher's medal is happy. And that doesn't really matter.
All right, fair enough. So you don't see it that like Sam and Matthias have got that little bit. And what I think the other big one that's for me got a question mark over him is 3 years ago, everyone thought Kevin Benavides had it. He was the guy, you know, he was the one that was coming. He was the one that was going to be the first South American winner. He was winning stages left, right, and center. Does he still have that, or are those crashes he's had, have they done it? Have they messed? Do they mess with people's head too much?
I mean, there's not many people that have ever kind of come back from those kind of, you know, it's a very small number that have those big crashes and find that absolute extreme level again. Like Toby's one of the few. Most of the time, once those guys have that real big one, they're still absolutely world class, but they don't seem to have that last little edge. I don't know. You know, I'm not in that position. I don't know what that feels like. But I mean, Benavides was, you know, he openly admitted it messed with his head a lot, didn't he?
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
Straight afterwards, and he kind of had a whole reassessment of life, as it were. And you know, as we know these days, when people hit their heads, it's also like it's more than the problem of will, isn't it? Once you've hit your head, maybe your brain just doesn't function quite as fast as it used to.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt indeed. So 1 Honda, 1 KTM podium, KTM win. Interesting. There we go. I don't have much more else to say about that. But we have got quite a few questions.
You always make us make a call. Come on, make a call. Come on, make a call.
Make a call.
See, now that we've both done the sensible, easy option, you've now got to go out on a limb and call someone off the beat. So that's the rules. Like
I don't think it'd be too out there to call Sanders for it. If he rode a little bit more sand, I'm gonna call Sam. No particular reason. I just like him, and I think he could do pretty well. He's already won it once, and the year after he won it, obviously he had a little bit of an unfortunate moment, but he was showing that he clearly still like had the stuff to make it happen, you know. So I'm going to put Sam on the W. Not that I believe that that's going to happen, but someone's got to say something different. So we've got a few readers' questions to finish things off. I'm going to run through them quickly. There was a bunch of people telling us that our audio was off because we were talking to each other. First one is, I'm very bad at that. Is the Dakar becoming a business more than a tradition? You guys are closer to the event, but this than most of us. But this is the feeling. That's from Andre Deneda.
It's not becoming. That's a misunderstanding. It always has been. Anyone that's been to scrutineering and had their wallet emptied, even when they think they've already paid for everything, and had to go for a cash machine in the middle of Paris.
Well, there's
years ago, we'll know this.
Well, there's a standard Dakar unit in there. It's 500 euros is like a standard Dakar unit, and maybe you get lucky and it's a half unit. maybe you're...
Yes, you don't have the stamp? What do you mean you don't have the stamp? 500 euros.
Yes. Anyway, that's a subject we're going to ignore because you'd never ever go again. I mean, Jared Sasek makes a good point that you know, it's an expensive race to put on, and he's right. But there's definitely decisions ASO make that are way beyond. Do you know they run the Tour de France in the same way, right? Like there's a train the length of before each stage. There's a massive promotional chain. Wow, I'm struggling with that. Massive promotional chain that spends hours driving through the stage before the riders get there, because that's what helps make them money, and they as a corporation know how to make money pretty good.
So here's a little game for those of you that don't know. They had to change the process for scrutineering this year, as you can well imagine, with all the COVID stuff going on. So they basically told all the riders to just drop their bikes off at the ferry port, and there wasn't going to be any scrutineering. So if your bike, they were going to scrutineer the bikes, and if they failed scrutineering, they would fix it for you. and send you a bill.
No.
So
God.
let's see who falls foul of that one.
Tough times, man. So there was a quick question about the airbag situation, which was, I can't find it now. I just glossed over it in my little scrolly thing here, which was surely it will be safer to have neck braces, but that isn't necessary because the airbag acts as a neck brace. There's the question from Nick Dolan, one of our prolific patrons. Yeah, so basically the airbag completely surrounds the lower part of the helmet, so it works as a neck brace as well. So that is not a problem. That's why they've got rid of them, because the two can't interact together. Can the airbags be recharged quickly after a race? I actually don't know the answer to this.
Someone else has put something up there about that further down the comments.
The one I saw use small capsules and can be activated within a couple of questions. Well, there you go. That'll be that. A few jokes about adventure tires being used. Please, no. Adventure tires are great, but not for riding like that. That would be terrifying. Could you imagine? No. What else have we got?
I can't.
What was, this one's from Instagram, from Tim Moore. What was your favorite era of the rally?
As a viewer or as a competitor?
Well, I don't know.
And for me as a younger person watching the guys drag those massive Kajiva elephants and Super Teneres and stuff through sand dunes, like that's definitely what dragged me in. I've still got a memory of Carlos Mas on a Kajiva elephant snapping his chain in the middle of the dunes and crying when he was in contention for the win. That stuff was definitely the inspirational stuff for me. And but as a rider, definitely the South American years were like, they were all the ones I did in South America were fantastic for the reason Lel said. Like, they were an adventure, but the riding was just also really, really fun all the time. Tough but fun. Yeah.
So another Instagram based question. Honestly, it says, be honest, is it easier now it's moved? I don't know about that. But Sai was there and he's done other rallies. So he knows better than us how much pain it caused him.
I can only say it was really, really difficult. Yeah. From chatting to people who've done both, they said in South America it was maybe more technical and difficult physically, but the days are shorter. Whereas in Saudi it was just really long days and maybe a little bit off the technicality kind of side of things. And that's just from a couple of riders, but yeah, that's what they said. Because in Saudi as well, you don't have those kind of high temperatures that you would have had in South America.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we were doing those stages in 40-degree heat, then it would be like proper savage. But yeah, when it's like 25, 30 in the dunes, it's fine. Yeah.
It's a nice riding temperature in the sand dunes, 25 to 30 degrees.
Beautiful.
I suppose
it was always harder in the old days.
I to be honest,
man, I can't even get off my chair anymore.
To be honest, though, you're not going to find an argument from me on that, because I can't even push your old rally bike out the shed, let alone ride it.
Neither can I.
It felt like it goes through sand dunes rather than over them. Just a quick one. We were talking about rally bikes before. Deborah Bixter says, surely KTM and Husqvarna rally bikes are identical. Yes, they are, and so is the Gas. And so are most of the other bikes that are pretending to not be a KTM. A couple of questions about a few other things. Rusty Butter Is that a real name? That's a fantastic name if that's your real name. Are the liaisons still as long as in previous Dakars? No. We talked about this quite a bit back at the start. The liaisons are definitely not as long. Some questions about Neil. How do you think he's going to do this year? And will Neil only be in it to win it, or will he be taking things a little easier for a finish? Well, I think quite confidently every one of us can say that Neil is not in it to win it, without being mean. There's a little bit of an ability gap between Neil and a factory Dakar rider. How he's going to do is a question that I think only Neil can know. He's an incredibly good rider. There's no chance that he hasn't got the skill to finish that race. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's openly kind of said himself. In fact, he put it on his story today that he's going a little bit more with that kind of right mindset that even though he's in Malmoto, and I think last year he kept pretending he wasn't trying to win Malmoto, but maybe different side, but I think he did a little bit. But he's definitely going back with I think for me, the better mindset of finish first, and if he ends up near the front of Malmoto, like, that's a bonus, That's how it seems to me anyway.
Yeah.
So, are there any possible safety ramifications of the new shorter time scale on roadbook viewing?
I don't think so, really. And if there are, it's just positives, not like negatives. So, I'd say it's only a good thing. 20 minutes, enough to put it in your bike, and if you want to give it a quick scan, you can. But it's on you if you drop it in the sand or something like that.
or don't read it while you're riding. I think the other one for me that is like a positive safety ramification is that you now don't have an hour to 3 hours work tempting you. Even if you're like, I'm not going to do it, it's always there. And you end up doing it, and you end up fiddling with it. And the lead riders, they spend, upwards of 3 hours a night memorizing and reading and going through their roadbook, coloring it in. And they had other people doing the basic coloring for them to get all the, that stuff's gone.
Yeah.
They're not fiddling with that. They're eating, sleeping, job done. If you're a pro rider, you can go to bed 2 hours earlier now.
And even for them, like the stuff I've read with those guys, it's not even just the time. It's like clearing your brain, isn't it? It's much more restful than spending 4 hours studying every night.
Sounds good to me. More time to eat pasta.
Yeah, 100%.
So, this is directed at you, Dad. Have you ever ridden the 660 KTM rally? And if you have, how did it compare to your old BMW?
Yeah, I kind of, all the time I was riding the BMWs, I diligently avoided riding the KTM or anything else just in case I discovered what additional torture I was putting myself through. So I did pretty much avoid that. If I'm honest, and that was proven when after 9 Dakars on the 10th one, I finally got to ride a proper custom Dakar rally bike, and it's
they're well good.
They're so good, it's unreal.
So next question. This is from David Dickinson, also a patron, and also my girlfriend's dad. How much?
What are your intentions with my daughter?
What's your address? I'm coming to kill you, I think it says. How much does physical fitness and navigation skills needed compared to the technical bike riding ability? Like, I know you need all three, but which ones are more important? Over to you guys. You can answer that. I've always got opinions about these things, but you can answer that.
I think probably the fitness thing comes pretty high up because it just affects everything else. affects your ability to perform, to process the navigation, to to maintain that good riding position and everything else. So for me, I guess fitness would be pretty high up, and yeah, it's kind of why I've been spending this year working on that a lot for future events. So
yeah, I kind of totally agree. I think it's an interesting balance, right, between like the fitness for me is like you said, it's your safety net. Where if you're not such a good rider, you can rely on that in a much bigger way. You can get away with it if you're less of a good rider, but it dramatically affects everything else more than any other element. Like in my experience, Dakar wasn't the most technical race I've ever done by a long way. Technically, the hardest bit is probably riding a rally bike through big sand dunes. That's not so easy. I mean, I wouldn't call, compared to the bikes that Dad rode, they were a different level, right? But also the navigation in Dakar, I don't know what it was like in South America, but it wasn't dramatically difficult. What it's like in Saudi, but it wasn't dramatically difficult compared to other rallies I've done when we were in South America. There was a lot of tracks. When you're on a compass heading, you follow the arrow, and the hardest navigation is when you're in something a little bit more complicated. But that didn't really seem to play much of a factor until you were knackered, and that's your fitness that's determining that, right? So that's a really good question.
I think the only thing to add to that is, for me, the nav gets easier if you're fitter, for sure. But the fitness and the technical riding ability, like, they're kind of almost hand in hand as well. Like, you can't get one without the other. And the best example of that is you see it every year when these young guys come up in enduro, and they're winning the clubman class, and their special test times are faster than most of the experts. And then they step up to expert class and have to do an extra lap of the forest, and suddenly they can't go as fast anymore. You need those two things very much have to work together, and they come with each other. If you get the speed but you're not fit enough, you won't be able to maintain that speed with any safety, and vice versa. So I think you have to take those two things absolutely together, and they're both far more important than the navigation.
So there was a second part to David's question that I just completely missed at first. And what about the kind of mental toughness and having the right attitude?
I think the mental toughness you find out in the 9 months of getting to the start line. I'm sure I will 100% agree with this. Like, the hardest bit is up until you roll off that podium.
I think as well with that, the attitude thing, the only mistake I think you can make, and I think every single person makes it when they go to Dakar, unless they're like a super experienced desert racer, is that A, you think you can win even when you definitely can't, and B, at some point you inevitably override the situation massively. Like, I don't know if you had it, Si, but I've not seen anyone come away from their first Dakar and be like, man, I had the biggest moment. Do you know? Where you just fuck something up because you're going way too quick, or you think you're going to win against another guy in like 71st place, and you're like, I'm going to have him. And then you just do something that was super stupid for a position in a race.
I've got that arrow on the shelf over there with a 2-inch split down the back of it from my first Dakar.
Yeah, and I've still got some dreams in there that I have occasionally that I really wish I didn't have baked into my brain. Do you know? Moments where you're like, oh, I should not have done that. That was so bad. I don't know if you had any of those, but it seems like that's the only kind of attitude mistake you can have, is thinking you're way better than you are. Because really, Dakar's not a race against other people, is it? It's a race against the fact the desert's sketchy as hell.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, when I went last, this January just gone, I guess the kind of almost a blessing in disguise was that I was carrying an injury into the race, and that kind of just changed my outlook from the outset. So like, the whole time I was just riding, I normally ride like well within myself, but especially this year at Dakar, I was definitely dialing it back a fair few notches for sure. Yeah.
So the next question. Oh, go on, Dad.
I just there was just something else I meant to mention earlier as well. There's a few people asking questions about following the race there, because another little change they've made this year is the riders have been allowed to kind of choose their favourite number. So where we're used to sort of seeing the top 20 almost with the seeded 20 numbers on their bikes, there's some of the favourites have got crazy numbers, like, I think Barreta's like 88 or something, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something for the fans.
So there's a really good question here. I don't know if you've seen, but they've introduced a classic car category this year, which is quite cool. Yeah. Do you think they should introduce a retro bike category?
No.
Just because your retro bikes were crap doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it.
Well, you can borrow any of them anytime you like.
I'll take the XR.
Good luck.
Yours is Kickstart, isn't it? No, I'm good. I'm good. So, this is a good question from Nick. What is the diet on the race versus a training diet? What's a training diet? That's a joke. I think that this is a little mistake that I made when we first went. The first kind of 3 or 4 days the year I went, I tried to eat relatively well and was avoiding sugar and eating shitty foods. And I got to about 5 days in and I was like, dude, I need some calories in a massive way. And I started eating everything. Because I think you burn so much off. You become a bit like a unfit version of a Tour de France rider. You just need more. I don't think you can put enough in to manage what's going out because you expend so much. So what was the food like in South America, in Saudi this year?
I can't compare it to other editions, obviously, but it was okay. You could have as much as you wanted. Obviously, they had like the set kind of menus at breakfast and dinner, but they had like a pasta counter, which was like 24/7, and they were just like doing pasta and different sauces and cheese and stuff like that, which you could just go and get as much as you wanted any time of day, which was useful for sure. Because when you'd get in, they'd give you like a little goodie bag with like a sandwich, some crisps and stuff like that, which you'd like just inhale instantly as soon as you got back to the bivouac, and then get out your kit and stuff like that. And I mean, when I was getting in, it was usually dinner time anyway, but like the guys getting in before me could get like a pot of pasta and stuff anytime they wanted. And it was pretty good, really. There was like no limit to the amount of calories available to you, for sure.
Nice. So this question is another one from Rusty Butter. Such a good name, man. I hope it is your real name. Dull question, but is everyone confirmed or are some riders stuck at home with current COVID travel bans? That is a good question. I don't know the complete answer to that, but ASO and other people, well, they basically dealt with the situation by chartering flights for people rather than relying on people getting themselves there, right? So even Neil had this drama with his flights being cancelled and no one being allowed to leave the UK, but he got on a chartered flight with ProDrive, the car team, which is mental that's how they've made this happen, is that they just paid for planes to be put in the sky to go to a country where no one's allowed to land.
Yeah. There's one Peruvian rider that's withdrawn because he couldn't get out of Peru. For sure. And then I've seen a couple of team members, like a team manager for a truck team, I think has tested positive before flying out. And I think like a co-driver for a car team same again, tested positive and had to be replaced. So, and I think there's going to be a lot of this between now and the end of the race, to be honest.
Because
I think it's going to be a real problem.
Once you get there, you have to be COVID free to be allowed into the bubble of the race, right?
Yeah.
So, Sai, you said you had some questions from Facebook followers as well.
Yeah. First one from my dad. The top 3 in the bikes. We covered that one around down of the and thoughts on the Brits. We talked about Sam and Jamie briefly there. Obviously, Naita. Hopefully he goes well. It's been a long time coming for him to get to Dakar. It can nearly happen for him about 10 years ago, I think. But hopefully he goes well now. I think his expectations of a finisher's spot are different now than 10 years ago. But hopefully he just gets a decent finish. And obviously Neil, our mate, hopefully he smashes it and brings home a medal. And then one question from Marcus Mullins from Swansea. He travelled to Peru in 2019 to watch the Dakar, to follow it. He was on a bike. He had a bad experience with local police who took his money and he had basically a bad time. He's asking advice for following the race and dealing with corruption in the local areas when alone, including back in Africa and stuff like that. So basically, how do you follow the race on your Todd safely and without getting in trouble with local authorities?
Well, I think in Saudi you can't anymore. I think that opportunity is gone because freedom of movement for Western people is not really allowed in Saudi, is it? You can only really do it as part of an organized thing now. They offer that.
You can only... Yeah, so it's a visa. The visa to get into Saudi is for the rally, isn't it?
Yeah.
Be part of the caravan.
Or they do that kind of... that thing.
That sort of has gone full circle as well, because it was the case in Africa as well. People used to come into Morocco to follow Dakar, that European and Morocco stages, but actually you weren't allowed to follow it once it left Morocco. Once it went over that border into Western Sahara or whichever direction it was leaving Morocco, it was always you weren't, from the organisation side and from the government side, you weren't supposed to follow it. There was a few hardy people that managed to blag their way across borders and turn up at bivouacs, but it was a handful, 2-3 sort of super hardy people. It generally wasn't a thing. And then obviously South America totally flipped that on its head and changed it.
But even then, it's still pretty hard to follow, right? For the same reasons he just said as well. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through as a normal person that you don't in that race, right? They sort so much of, especially in South America, they sorted all your visas out and your border controls were 30 seconds because the stamps are already done. If you're a normal person trying to keep up with Dakar, it's almost impossible to move as quickly and see anything. And because in reality, if you're not in that race, the logistics of trying to ride 800 to 1,000 Ks a day are really hard. That's not an easy thing to do.
Stop and watch the race go by.
Yeah, exactly. And then to get through border crossings and not get done over by police looking for money. I imagine that was probably where it started to go downhill in South America a little bit as well, is people had enough of it. They'd had enough of this big old money train coming through that was kind of at odds at their own situation, right?
Yeah.
This is a great question from Craig Searles. How do you constantly stay hydrated? I'd smash 2 liters in an hour. Also, do you pee on the fly? Sorry if this question has been asked. These are great questions. Well, depends how hot it is. I don't know how you did it, Si, but I always had a 3 liter Camelback plumbed into my helmet so that I don't overdrink. I'm a person that pees a lot, and I didn't pee on the fly that much because it's kind of horrible. I'm sure, did you try it at all, Si? Have you ever?
No, I I had to pee a lot in Saudi.
It's
Like
cold.
I definitely drank too much because it was cold, and then when it's cold, you don't sweat, and that liquid has to leave somehow. And I remember some days I couldn't do 50 kilometers without stopping to pee, and yeah, it was a nightmare for sure.
I think the cold makes that worse as well, right? Like we had a very similar experience in South America. You have altitude and you have the cold, but you do need to drink something because you're always using it, even if there's that difficult balance. It is hard. Peeing on the fly is an interesting one. It's really gross. Like it's just not a nice experience. If you like just pee yourself, obviously, that I wouldn't recommend that your boots fill up. It's horrendous.
So nice.
But there is a few stories of people making like homemade pleasanter versions of like catheters so they can pee while they ride, and they just have like a little tube that comes out the leg of their trousers, and so they can pee while doing that, which is maybe that's a good idea if you're like a serial peer and you want to go fast. But I don't know about you, Si. I got really good at peeing without getting off my bike, like just being able to stop and have a pee and then go again, like straight away. Now, it's the things you figure out, right? When you do 50 Ps in a 10-day period, you get really good at it.
When you stop to pee, it's like maybe a minute, 2 minutes. You do that like 5-6 times a day. That's like 10 minutes a day.
It adds up, right?
Over the course of the 2 weeks, that's like 2 hours over the course of the Dakar. So like
micro gains, man.
Okay. So otherwise you would have finished another 10 places higher. I get it. What page is that on?
Those micro gains. All right, we're an hour and 37 minutes in. I reckon we've probably said enough for now, unless anyone's got another question in the next 10 seconds. Bearing in mind the broadcast is like 30 seconds ahead, I think it's time to call it time. Feel free to tell everyone where they can find you, Si, and follow your journey and what you've got going on.
Yeah, so I've got a Facebook page. It's called Simon Hewitt Dakar 2020.
Very original.
It won't be called that. I know. Yeah, it won't be called that for very long. I've got a bit of an announcement on the page tomorrow evening at about 7:00. So tune in there. Obviously on Instagram and Twitter as well. So yeah, get amongst it.
Nice. What about you, Dad? You know, you do that teaching.
I got cheese and crackers.
You do that teaching thing, right?
Oh yeah. Well, no, I don't want to talk about that until the new year.
All right. No. I'm talking about off-road skills. You know, that company you run where they teach people to ride motorbikes. You can tell people about that.
That's very good. Well done. Thank you very much.
All right. There we go. Yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this very much. We also have another live stream on the 30th, which is just going to be me answering random questions and drinking beer, basically. But you're more than welcome to come along and watch that. And as one of our patrons just put up, Nick Dolan, next Mini Tip Monday, peeing on the bike without stopping. If you want to watch Mini Tip Mondays, come and become a patron. I'll teach you things on the internet and have many more podcasts like this over the next 2 months. We're going into season 2 of our podcast very shortly. So come and say hello there. And otherwise, thank you very much for watching. If you want to watch Dakar, it depends on the country you're in. But in the UK, it's Eurosport is a good place every day, half-an-hour TV show. Red Bull TV also do a 15-minute-ish slot on their website, Red Bull TV. I don't know if it's .com or not. Just to search it on a search engine. And yeah, that's probably about it for good coverage, unless you want to go really deep and start digging up fan footage that's buried in YouTube somewhere. Those are the 2 best sources of information other than that, and spamming F5 on the results page, hoping that your rider has just come in. Unless I've missed something there, you two. Sweet. Well, thank you very much.
That's trackingdakar.nl. That's a good website.
Great website. They've somehow stolen all the results data from ASO and turned it into a functional results page. Yeah, so also worth looking at. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Ciao.
Cheers.